So we've created our project, we played around with it in an IDE, and now it's time to package it up and send it to our users. With Cradle, this is pretty easy. The only downside for some people, I guess, is that you have to do it on a command line. There's ways to do it in the IDE, but I will only show you how to do it in the command line because that is pretty much IDE agnostic, and you can also run it on an integration server or build server. So let's fire up the terminal. On Windows, you can use cmd.exe. On Mac, I just use this fancy little thing here. So let's navigate to our root directory. In this case, it was downloads test. And as you can see, this is our project on the command line. So let's package the application for a desktop. The current bundling mechanism for the desktop is putting everything into a single jar file, which is executable. So let's see how we can create this jar file. It's pretty easy. You have to invoke cradle w. On Windows, it would be cradlew.bat. So cradle w, and then you specify the project, and as a task, you specify dist. This will now compile the application for the desktop, just like it did in the IDE. It will also package the assets and put everything into a jar file. In addition to the class files and assets, we will also write a manifest file into the jar file, which will invoke our desktop launcher. So now let's see where this jar file was put. It's in the desktop project build directory, which is where Cradle puts all of its build artifacts, and there it is in the libs directory. As you can see, it's also versioning our stuff. So let's execute this. Java -jar desktop build libs desktop. And that fires up our application. We can of course also directly run it by double-clicking the jar file, which is also how your end users may want to run the application. So build libs and desktop. So that works as expected. This jar file will work on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X, all the same. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is how to package for Android. For Android, you usually create an APK file. For distribution on Google Play Store or Amazon or Samsung Store, you will have to sign your APK with a special key. You can find details about that process on the wiki, on the Cradle on the command line wiki article. There we describe the packaging in a little bit more detail with links to third-party sources. What I'm going to show you here in this video is create a debug APK. That is, you don't have to sign it. And that's actually pretty simple. You just say cradle w Android project and assemble debug. This takes your project, compiles it to a jar file, then compiles it to a DEX file, and packages all the assets of your Android project, including the icons and launch configuration and all of that stuff, and puts it in an APK file. That APK file you can then distribute to your friends or whoever you want to test the application, and they can install it on their Android device by simply enabling the installation from third-party sources. So where is this file located? It's in the Android project build APK, and there it says Android -debug -underlined. Release builds require key store and other fancy things. As I said, this is documented on the wiki. For iOS, you want to create an IPA file. Now that is a little bit more involved because it also requires sign-in and so on and so forth. The Apple guide on the App Store, on the development page of Apple, will tell you all about the nitty-gritty details of this horrible process. On a command line, it's pretty simple. I don't execute it here, but it's basically cradle w iOS create IPA, and that would generate an IPA in the iOS project's build folder. Finally, we want to check out how to distribute our HTML5 webgl version of the game. Again, this is pretty simple. We don't deploy anything Java in that case. We deploy JavaScript files, CSS files, and HTML files, and all of our asset files. All of this can be served as static resources from any HTTP server, so be it Apache, Nginx, Nginx, or whatever you have. So let's just start by creating the distribution for HTML. So this works by saying we want the HTML project and we want the dist task in the HTML project. Now this takes all the Java code, the assets, compiles the Java code to JavaScript, and then puts all of that plus the assets plus your HTML file in the HTML/web app directory into a specific output directory. You can then copy all of those resources just as they are to any kind of web server, and then access your HTML5 version from any web server. You can even host your game on Dropbox if you want. You can also, and I highly recommend that, you can also modify the HTML file that's responsible for displaying your game. So if you go into your HTML project, you can see a web app directory, and there's an index.html file. Now when you create your project, we provide you with this not so fancy version of it. If we look at the source of this, it's a pretty simple HTML file, really. The first couple of things here, the style sheet, that's of course totally up to you. You have to include those two scripts, which are the sound library. Then we have a little button here, which is totally not necessary. You can remove that in production. And then you have the element where the game is actually being displayed. The ID is actually specifying that this is the div where the game is being displayed. And finally, we include the source code of our game. And that's pretty much all you need. The script at the bottom here is responsible for making sure that your mouse cursor doesn't do anything stupid, and that key presses get pushed to the div up here as appropriate. So if you have something more fancy, you can easily integrate your game by just including the code, the JavaScript code, specifying a div, executing this little bit of script, and also integrating the Sound Manager 2 stuff. Okay, now the compilation for HTML5 takes a while, as you see, 2 minutes on my machine, but finally it's done. So let's see what the output is. We go to the HTML project in the build directory. There's a dist folder now, and in here we have all the files we need to serve our project to any kind of browser. Now, if you're on Linux or Mac OS X, you usually have Python installed, and you can easily run a simple HTTP server by saying python -m simple HTTP server, which will spin up an HTTP server on your inbound network interface on port 8000, and then you can test your game in your browser. And that's it. I recommend checking out the wiki for more information on how to package your application for the various mobile stores. Okay.